Shalom. First and foremost, like of all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Makar Kadash, and the Heavenly Father, which name is Yahweh, and his only begotten Son, Bahashem, in the name of Hamashiach, Yahweh Shai. Those are the true names in ancient Hebrew, the Lashon Holy Tongue, and I say, welcome down to the elders and apostles. I'm offering us the Shalom. And this is a outside lesson for the third time, outside lesson number 3, as of April 18, 2026, on this Saturday noon. And that's the top of outside lesson number 3, Mark chapter 13, verse 7, verse 8. And we're going to precept for that. Let's look at Matthew chapter, we're going to precepts. And let's look at Matthew chapter. So look at Matthew chapter 12, verse 25. It says, and Yahweh shall know that all by the hearts of mine. He say unto them, every kingdom divided itself should be brought to destination, or every city house divided itself should not stay. Right, and that's what we see. And that's what Yahweh Shai spoke about, because he spoke to the disciples at the Mount of Olives during that time, which they later became apostles. So in these modern day times, we say in these, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, modern day rule against modern rule, like it says in the book of Jeremiah 51, verse 46. We said that was that Matthew 24 chapter that Yahweh Shai says, wars. And it was I just checked my feed on YouTube, and it said, I think it was from, I forgot it was, Al Jazeera, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, just now. Yeah, see if it's right up there. Yeah, it was reported from Sky News. Yeah, it says from Sky News, reported 6 minutes ago. It says vessels reported being fired upon in the Strait of Hormuz. Right, so vessels were fired upon the Strait of Hormuz. And then I see something from CBS News. Iran did a reverse course to close down the Strait of Hormuz once again. And that shows that these tensions might escalate once again, because there was some type of intel report from Israel Defense Force media reports. They were saying that if this current situation that's taking place right now of missile vessels were shot upon, and I believe it was Indian vessels, if I'm not mistaken. That was according to the report. So we got to see how this plays out now that the Strait of Hormuz has been closed. And then you had Aero 47 speaking to media. He said all pretty little Iran has closed Strait of Hormuz. He was saying they ain't really got no military might and strength. Now we see a change in regime in the process, but at the same time, those Iranians, they still managed to fight back, So a lot of, you can't really believe Aero 47 all the time, because, he's kind of double-minded at times. Like, we might have a deal with Iran, and then next if they don't agree upon the deal, we might use a nuclear strike. We might continue to escalation with it. So this guy's kind of double-minded. He's unstable. But I just want to add a side note to that. But we still going to be seeing these nations, armies of nations, they still going to rise up against one another. And this is the book of Matthew chapter 24, verse 6. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars, right? So we're still going to see wars and rumors of wars, despite the fact you got this 2-week ceasefire. Despite the fact, we've been seeing this on and on back and forth. But these tensions are continue to still rise and increase between these nations. That's what we see. And so modern day rule against modern rule, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, is going to continue to increase. It says Matthew 24:6, ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Right, so on a daily basis, we're still going to be seeing rise and increasing of these modern day wars and rumors of wars between these armies of nations. So you're still going to have these political wars, economic wars, nuclear wars, oil wars, sanctuary wars, trade wars, you name it. Despite the fact it's been on and on back and forth, but it's going to increase once again. Matthew chapter 24:6, ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled for all these things, and it's first come to pass, but it's not yet. Right, so it's going to come to pass, but not going to get it yet. So on a daily basis, we're seeing the rise and uptake and increase of these modern day wars and rumors of wars that Yahweh Shai spoke about. And this is the book of Matthew chapter 24, verse 7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Right, that's still continues to increase. Which that been on and on back and forth for about millions of years. You can see that increase once again, which goes into efforts. And there should be famines, right? We're going to see famines increase, right? And pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. So that's going to continue to increase. And this is in the book of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 8. All these are the beginning sorrows. Right, so these just the beginning stages of what's about to continue to increase in the world today. And this is the book of Luke 21, another precept. This is Luke 12 and verse 51. Yeah, Luke 12 verse 51. It says, supposing that I come to get peace on earth, I tell you native red division. Right, so Yahushua says, I think not that I come to set peace on earth, I tell you native red division. And it's still at least they got that war mindset. At times you might talk about peace, and then at the same time you might talk about war. And so, trust not enemy, trust not war, so it's not witness. And his words is still in the word. So that shows you that Heavenly Father team is all about ourselves and others and religions. This is Mark chapter 3, verse 24, that precept. It says, it says, and he called them unto it says he called them unto him, and he said in parable, how can Satan cast out Satan? Right, so Yahushua said in the parable, how can Satan cast out Satan? Question mark. And verse 24, and if a kingdom be divided, such not stand. Right, so we see these modern day nations and modern day kingdoms are being divided now. So and you had Hero 47. I did a sit down lesson on it yesterday about if the kingdom be divided against itself. And you had a news article from RG.com. He called, hey, this is what Donald Trump has said to NATO. He was saying that we don't need NATO to move. We can separate from them. We might withdraw from them and call them useless. Basically, shows that, and that shows that we're seeing this division between these Edomite nations. And what's that? Revelation 17 verse 16. We share the war. That's what we see. So that's the part of Edomite nations are being divided down. So that's what we continue to increase. This is the book of verse 25. So I'll keep that. This is Mark chapter 3. Mark chapter 3, verse 25. It says that if a house be divided, the house can stand. Right, so if a house be divided, the house can stand. And this is verse 26. It says that if Satan rises against something divided, the house can stand. Right, so if Satan rises against something divided, the house can stand. That's what we're saying. Now, if we get to that Mark 13 chapter, basically another precept to it. Yeah, let's look at Mark chapter 13. Let's look at Mark chapter 13 and verse Mark chapter 13, verse 7. It says, when you should hear of wars and rumors of wars, he says, be not hurt for such things must lead, but men shall be dead. Right, so Yahushua says, this must lead me, which is not an angel yet. This is so on a daily basis. Of course, it's got to come to pass, but we ain't going to interject. So that's how I mentioned again on a daily basis. We're going to see these rising, we're going to take on these escalations and still continue to increase organizations, especially with this Russian I'm waiting for the struggle real fast. Especially with this Russian-Ukraine situation heating up, that's still heating up on a daily basis. And all these modern day escalations and tensions are heating up on these nations on a daily basis, especially over there in the South China Sea. And you still got China versus Taiwan, that's still heating up. Despite the fact they had talks, had meetings with one another, they still got those tensions heating up over there. Modern day territorial islands, not too far from the South China Sea, China versus the Philippines, China versus Japan, and over there in the Korean Peninsula, you got North Korea versus South Korea, Japan, United States. That's still heating up. You still got tensions heating up over there in Sudan as they enter in the fourth or fifth year. They get tensions heating up over there in different parts of Africa, over there in Atlantic, they still got tensions heating up over there in Sudan, over there in Myanmar. You still got tensions still heating up in different parts of the world. And that's what you call the strengths of nations, or complexity of form. That's what we call Luke 20, 25. And this is Mark chapter 13, verse 8. It says, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Right, so you're going to have a nation within itself rise against one another, and then outside of another nation rise against another nation. It says a kingdom against kingdom. So you got modern day a kingdom rising against one another, and then outside of another kingdom rising against another kingdom. That's what we're seeing. And there's sure be earthquakes in diverse places. Right, so right along with that, you're going to have an uptick in earthquakes in diverse places, an increase in famines and troubles. These are the beginning of sorrows. Right, we're talking about that Matthew 24, chapter verse 8, and that second Exodus, verse 18. And this is another precept. And this is the book of Luke 21 and verse 10. Yeah, this is the Gospel of Luke 21. I'm starting at verse 9. Yeah, another precept. This is the Gospel of Luke 21 and verse 9. It says, but when you should hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass. but the end is not yet end by, right? So it's going to come to pass. It's not going to end yet end by. This is Luke 21 verse 10. It says, then say he unto them, nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. So we're going to see all this more. We're going to see more of these things to come, of the rising against nation, rising against kingdom. Just like I mentioned again at Jeremiah 51 verse 46. Another year shall be another year. A Roman shall be another year after another year. Roman, a modern day rule against modern rule. That's what we're seeing. It's like that was happening days ago Jeremiah, and we're back in those days once again, but in modern day times. So expect to see more wars, rumors of wars, more of these wars and commotions, more the stress of nations with complexity that's going. Since I quoted that, I'm bringing that out as well too. This is Luke 12 verse 25. It says, there shall be signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, and upon the earth the stress of nations with complexity of one. Right, so that's what we're seeing is modern day stress of nations with complexity of one. We're still going to have tests on heating between these nations. And despite the fact they try to get tensions, but these tests are going to continue to increase. That's what we're seeing on the world today. And so everybody have my shot there. Oh yeah, bring out that second image. We got chapter 9 verse 3. It says, therefore there shall be said earthquakes and uproars people roar. Right, and that's what we said, the uproars people roar, and then we see these seditions, rises, uproars people roar, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. So that's going to continue to increase. And that's what we're seeing. So with that, this was just a outside lesson for the third time as of April 18th, 2026 on this Saturday noon/afternoon. So hopefully this was edifying. The book of Mark chapter 13, verse 7 to verse 8. And that's the title of the outside lesson number 3. That's of April 18th, 2026 on this Saturday noon. So with that, I'd like to give all praises and glory and honor to say Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Wakar Kadash, and the Heavenly Father, whose name is Yahweh, and His only begotten Son, Bahashem, and the name of Hamashiach Yahushai. Those are the two names in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, the Lashon Kodash, the Holy Tongue. And I say Barakathon to the elders and apostles, Ba'aki and Ba'akwa. Until next time, I will say Kum Mesharal and the Ball. Shalom. So I'm going to be back at it again. I'm going to do a street ministry teaching and going on with the teaching through spirit, progress, and mercy of Yahweh Yahushua. Until next time, I'll say Kum Mesharal and the Ball. Shalom.